advising clients across the country. Here he is, your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner. Thanks for being with us. Our show, as you know, is a financial show. We talk about all the important issues of money matters, as well as the issues that make the money matters matter. So in any case, I'm glad to have you with us. And again, this hour, I'm joined by Jeff Perry, co-hosting for us this week. And before we get into our next topic and our next guest, Jeff, I can't help but carry over some of the feelings and impact from our last couple of guests, but particularly in talking with Steve and the Exaros and the emotion that conveyed with his loss of his son in his military service. It just gives you a greater appreciation for the families who have fallen members in the military services that have given, so much.
That's what this weekend's about. And so I'm really appreciative of Steve. It's not only as a person, but for coming on. I know how difficult it is. And if you didn't hear the interview, if you're just joining us now, go back to our podcast and listen to it. The raw emotion. This is 14 years later. I mean, this isn't yesterday. In some ways it is yesterday for him. I don't mean
I'm sure it stays with you. And I'm sure all of his family members, you can't help but experience that in a unique way and feel that loss. And I'm sure that's true for our
all the Gold Star families.
Gold Star families. Yeah. And in any case, it brought it home in a way. Thank you for arranging that interview and conducting that interview that really touched me. I'm sure our members of our audience in a way that really gives perspective to what we're really about remembering and celebrating on Memorial Day, the contributions of so many for the freedoms that we enjoy and value and probably take for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the contributions of these families as well, that means so much for us to remember and to appreciate. And so appreciate you arranging that and for Steve to join us and sharing his story and some of that of his son.
You're very welcome. I've had the privilege of meeting and knowing and loving more Gold Star mothers usually, but I'll just say families than I
you wish you could. You wish you had to, right? Yeah.
Right. Then I wish I had to, but them sharing their stories at events or in charities or on the radio, or it's important for us to, as you said, to remember. And it's also important for the young people, the children, our grandchildren, to hear these stories of the sacrifices for the freedoms that we should hold dear. So
and to your point, we'll have to have opportunity for more of these kinds of guests that can make it personal, make it real, not just an abstract of and strictly the barbecues and all the rest,
right,
which is great, but to bring it home to what we're really remembering this weekend.
Yeah, and as Steve said on the air, in the last segment, it's okay to have that barbecue.
Sure, but
take a moment and raise a glass and spend a couple minutes just remembering why we have this weekend and why we have the holiday.
So if you didn't get to hear that, if you're just joining us this hour, remember you can get our show by podcast. We post our podcast each week, and you'll be able to find our show not only on your favorite podcast resource, whether it's iTunes or iHeart or Spotify or whatever else you might listen to, Audible and Google and all the rest. You can also find it when we post on our social media. We provide insights through all of our various social media outlets, and we're starting to post our show as a YouTube program as well. So hope you'll take advantage of any or all of these possibilities. Well, probably not all, not simultaneously anyway, one at a time, perhaps. Anyway, take advantage of these. And I really, if you could, we'd really appreciate you if you listen on a podcast to give it a like, maybe even a comment, give it a rating. Let other people know so they can find us as well.
It does make a difference. The more interaction we have with our podcast, the more people get a chance to listen to it.
Well, let's transition. We also mentioned last hour, and we'll remind everyone again, time's running out. We are coming up in a little over a week. We have our Social Security and Medicare seminar coming up, an educational program. It's complimentary. We hope you'll join us. We're not selling any products or pushing any, it's not a dinner thing where we got to sell so much to make money on the deal. It's just an educational program. We think you'll find it valuable. And of course, if you want to talk to us afterwards, we'll be thrilled to have you do that. But it's very low key but hopefully very informative. We're having this at the Courtyard Marriott in Hyannis on Tuesday, June 6th, from 9 to 11. Talking about Social Security and Medicare, and we've got some great speakers that are presenting. Marcia Mentel of Mentel Retirement Consulting, who you may have heard on our show a couple weeks back, talking about Social Security, did a great job. Lots of questions, lots of issues. You can really get a better insight on this, as well as Medicare. These are foundations of your financial plan as you go into retirement. So if you're someone who's approaching your 60s or maybe in your 60s, these may be really valuable insights, or even someone who's maybe even made some of these decisions but doesn't really understand some of the nuances of, say, Medicare as an example or something. We've got Susan Flanagan also from she's a Medicare senior plan consultant with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. They provide, they provide these kinds of plans. This program, this talk that Susan will share, is product agnostic, talking about the different parts of Medicare, and it's in no way, selling any one product or another. So, great opportunity to understand the issues that you will face as you move closer to retirement, and make sure you've got the right game plan in place. So, if you're thinking about retirement soon, attend this program. It's going to be very helpful to you. And you can register online at amrfinancial.com or give us a call, 508-771-8900. We're actually need you to, right now, the phones go to the studio during the show. So after the show, give us a call. Or if it's easier right now, you want to deal with it at this very moment, send us a text from your mobile phone. You can text us 508-915-3700. All right, let's move on to other issues. Hope we'll see you on the 6th. But in the meantime, Jeff, we've got another guest, although it's another member of our team from Asset Management Resources. And to make things a little more confusing, we've got another Jeff to join us. Jeff Tomaneng is a member of our team. He is a certified financial planner practitioner, as well as a CDFA. That's a credential for people who are knowledgeable about divorce aspects of financial planning, as well as many, many other credentials that Jeff has.
Way too many.
How many do you have still? At one time you had 18. I think maybe you let one or two go just because it was too many to keep up with. What do you, 16?
I think I'm around 16 right now.
You should see how big his business card is. It's like that.
Yeah. Takes two hands to pass it over. Yeah. Well, anyway,
really small font to fit it all on there, right?
Jeff Tomaneng, thank you for being with us. So, and happy Memorial Day weekend to you as well.
As to you.
We wanted to remember, we've been talking to noticed that over the last couple of weeks that that May apparently is the month to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage. And it occurred to us, hey, we have someone who fits that description on our team. Tell us about your heritage to start us off.
Well, first of all, the last segment is this is a good segue from the last segment. To me, very, very personal around those who have, made sacrifice for our country. When I think of the preamble to the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. We can change that to all people are created equal. And when you're part of an ethnic group or a group that may or may not be marginalized, such as those, I as a Filipino American have been part of that group, but because this is part of what is the foundation for this country, I have a great respect for those who fight for those rights. So thank you for recognizing that on your show.
Thank you for saying that. Well done. So your heritage is Filipino. How far removed are you, Jeff, from that?
Yeah, so I'm a first generation Filipino American here. So my parents moved here in the 1960s, here meaning to the United States, as part of a special medical visa that was given for those in the medical profession, to go to some of the Asian stereotypes. My dad was a doctor and my mom was a nurse. Plenty of Filipino nurses here in the US. And so they moved here to continue in their respective professions and make a better life for themselves and for their respective families back in the Philippines.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your parents?
Sure. My mom was one of 6 siblings, growing up in a province in a city called Tacloban on the island of Leyte, which is better known for being the island where General MacArthur landed in their strike during the war years ago. My dad was the third oldest of 11 siblings. And in both cases, I think it was identified that they had a certain level of intelligence and work ethic. And so a lot of sacrifices were made to send them to school so they could make some money and help out the rest of the family. And that led them to their respective educations and then to their professional journey. And I was fortunate to have them as parents.
And they've both passed at this point, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They for a couple of different health issues, they both died in their 50s, in the early 90s. So it's interesting as you discuss. This is Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and I've even heard it referred to as NHPI, because the NH being Native Hawaiian, because sometimes that is a particular group that is not recognized. Even though there are those who were born in that region, they were in that region, but they were just kind of lumped into the whole AAPI group. So yeah, it's something this particular month, these it gets me thinking about my own heritage.
Mhm.
And and also there's also an affinity within our profession, the financial advisory, financial planning profession. And for different reasons, a lot of us, because there aren't a lot of Asian Americans who are in the financial planning profession, percentage wise. Some of us tend to kind of find out about each other, and
Well,
which is kind of nice.
on that subject, Jeff, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and that Chris brought to my attention
Thanks for sharing all that too. Yeah.
You're welcome.
was a article on eMoney talking about Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, certainly, but they're talking about amplifying Asian American voices in financial planning, which is where you're going. And they searched the country and found 8 individuals who are at the leaders of their field, and you are recognized as one of those 8 influential individuals. So congratulations on that.
Congratulations. You had some real rock stars in your midst in that. That's awesome. Nicely done.
And
Thank you.
I must say, they only reference 5 of your credentials in the article. I think they had ran out of space.
I'm lucky I'm in some very good company. I know most of the people on that list, and not for any specific reason. I think we just attended some of the same conferences and struck up relationships and became friends. Like one of them just reached out to me, and we're gonna kind of catch up on some industry related stuff tomorrow. And even the author of the article is someone who kind of who I met because she was an award winner for our Financial Planning Association for the volunteer work that she does. And I didn't even know what her ethnicity was, and it turns out she's also Filipino American, as am I. So I was, again, fortunate enough to be on the list and very honored. Some good people on there, some friends that I've made on there, and just happy to be part of it.
Tell us a little bit about some of the other names on the list besides yourself, because I recognized a couple of the names there as well, and thought, wow, these are definitely some leaders in our community that they're recognizing here, our professional community, and it's kind of neat to see that there is that representation.
Well, I mean, I'll start with the author. The author, Celeste Ravelli, is she's a CFP professional who has worked in the fintech space. She actually doesn't work for eMoney. She used to. Now she works for Fidelity in their digital planning division. But she had done a lot of work around making making financial planning available to underserved communities, and the development and promotion of making financial planning services available through digital platforms. And so as a result, she was recognized with FPA Financial Planning Association's Heart of Financial Planning Award last year.
Nice.
And she's a bright, young, intelligent woman, and it was just great to get to know her a little bit.
How many of this list have been guests on the podcast that you and I are both co-hosts of? That is for the Financial Planning Association of New England.
Surprisingly, only 2. I think the author, and then the other would be James Lee, who is the president of Financial Planning Association this year, 2023.
Board of directors.
Yeah. So he's been on the board of directors for a few years. And
how have we not had Margarita Chang?
I don't know.
How do we miss her as a guest?
We just, you know what, the thing is, and as excited as I am about the recognition of all my fellow Asian American financial planners that are on this list, there are so many people within the profession who do good work and are thought leaders and do things that make our profession better, help consumers, help society. So it's just, I am thinking about how we can bring more of these.
I think we got a little
on there.
A little game plan for the podcast that we should maybe start thinking about some of these thought leaders in various constituencies that we should maybe showcase.
So I'll do a little cross-reference, plug for our Financial Planning Association podcast, because it is separate from something more with Chris Boyd, even though you're co-hosting on both of those programs. It's the Financial Planning Association of New England Wicked Pissah Podcast. And what we do there is
heard that right. That's what its actual name is.
It is Wicked Pissah Podcast.
A name that's easy to remember.
It's a Wicked Pissah. Our discussion there is mainly geared towards financial professionals on how they can do things. We bring on guests who will talk about how they can help financial planners and advisors do things better, do better things for consumers, do better things for the profession, and just share with us thought leadership on how financial planning has evolved over the years and how it is moving forward. So again, for our listeners, if you do want to check out what we're doing, it's FPA New England Wicked Pissah Podcast, and you can check that out on iTunes or Google or wherever it is that you
wherever you get your podcasts. Jeff, I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover, but thank you. I appreciate, number one, taking the time to talk about this and showcase some of your fellow professionals. This article was a nice boost to see how you're landing among them as leaders in our profession. And I just keep up the good work with the podcast, and as well as the servicing and the work that you do with our clientele.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you having me on.
This is Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Chris Boyd. I'm here with Jeff Perry, and we are changing gears a little bit.
We're changing a lot of gears this week, Chris.
Well, there's a lot to talk about with what's going on in DC and other ways. Look, we recorded our program on Thursday this week when we were talking with our guests, and at this point, the debt ceiling is unresolved. Okay. Hopefully, by the time our show airs, it will be resolved.
Hopefully,
fingers crossed. Knock on wood. But that being said, it's creating more anxiety among investors, among clients. I got emails this week about the debt ceiling, more inquiries, texts from friends.
Sure.
What do you think is going to happen? How should this affect the way we invest?
Well, it's headline news every hour.
So I'm going to share my thoughts on this again a little bit, but keep it brief. Big picture is, look, we think it's likely that this gets resolved. The reason we think it's likely is it would be such a self-imposed disaster. It would be such a bad move to not solve this problem before it becomes problematic. There's a lot of speculation about how the Treasury will handle it, if there's a need for contending with who to pay first when this kind of thing, and there's not a mechanism for that. So it definitely has a lot of problems. If it's not resolved, it would be foolish. At the same time, we all recognize DC is very dysfunctional. And so it becomes a question of, and you got a question, do people really understand the economic consequences of this? That is, say, legislators, people. Are they really willing to roll the dice? We still think the odds are in favor of an outcome that is resolution. But let's talk about, what does an investor do? Recently got an inquiry from someone saying, should I pull everything out of the market? And, look, by and large, we have not seen that people are successful in timing the markets.
Right.
Moving out, in this case, when to get back in. It's understandable, the impulse. So
it could be it's a bet at that point, because there's no analysis. There's no financial analysis of the individual stocks or the funds or the bonds that you might own. It's not based on that. It's based on a
what's going to happen
unknown,
right?
With opposite reactions likely in the market, right?
Right. So first question is, do you have the right asset allocation? Can you tolerate the volatility that comes with that level of risk that you have invested in?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is no, it's a legitimate consideration to say, maybe I want to scale my risk down, not necessarily to time the market, not necessarily to jump in and out, but maybe to scale things back.
And that's a broader principle. It's not because of this. It's a general.
It happens to be the catalyst today, but it could be something else tomorrow. Right. That kind of mindset. And if you can't tolerate that volatility, if it's just too unsettling for you, can't sleep at night, too much anxiety, that's a legitimate thought process. I need to pull back on the reins, on the risk I'm taking, so that I'm not exposed to the extent I am presently. Fair enough. That's legitimate. If you say, no, I don't really want to do that, but I still think I want to be tactical. Oh, and by the way, our perspective is, if there is a market downturn because of this, if it's sufficiently notable, that's a great opportunity to rebalance your portfolio.
Right.
And be intentional about saying, okay, maybe I'll rebalance right size to my intended allocation, which does what? It forces you to buy low and sell high on something that's, done well. And that has virtue. So you're not necessarily adding more money that you have to buy low, but use it as an opportunity, as a buying opportunity. Okay.
Right.
So that's another possible way to think about this. Of course, everyone knows their own circumstances. And by the way, there's another reason why you should have a cash reserve for liquidity and, the buckets and all the things we talk about from week to week. But if you say, I can't take it, I'm not going to just I'm not going to just let things roll the way they are. My investment strategy that is intended to be for the long term. If you really can't take that, keep in mind that it doesn't always have to be an all or nothing approach to things.
That's a great point. I think people look at it like that.
Take it all out. I mean, maybe if you're really feeling that anxiety and you think this is somehow different, do something on the edges, on the margins, maybe some portion of your equities you deal with. It doesn't have to be all of it that you run away from.
I would add, though, if this is a short-term thing for you, meaning it's just come up in the last couple of days because of this single issue, don't let your emotions drive your decisions, because your emotions, the human body is designed to protect you from things, and it uses fear to do that, right? And so that fear isn't always exactly rational. You mentioned the word tactical and strategic. Though when you're emotional, you're not making either. You're not making good decisions, and they usually end up to be the wrong decision. So if it's a short-term thing, realize that's how you're feeling. Certainly call your financial advisor and talk to them about how you're feeling. I'm not suggesting that you don't do anything, but I'm just saying, don't let those emotions of fear or greed, we're not in a greed situation, but fear or greed drive your long-term plan.
And we're talking about this. Hopefully, this problem is resolved or is resolved soon, if it's not already. But look, it's if it's this thing this week, it's something else next week. These are the same kinds of fundamental principles that you need to be thinking about. And this is another reason why working with an advisor can add value.
Exactly.
And as much as people will criticize the idea of saying, stay the course and have a dedicated strategy that you implement. I know I see, advertisements, things where they are critical of that notion, where it's like, oh, buy and hold and never do anything. Well, that's not exactly what we're saying.
No.
But the point is, there is merit to long term to having an allocation that fits your temperament and not overreacting.
Right.
And so in any case, you had some stats, I think, too, didn't you? Didn't you have some polling information to share?
I do. And I'll just one more editorial comment on that is the market, the old saying, time in the market is better than timing the market. But I mean, the country has been through historically the last 100 years. If you think what the country has been through, just pick 100 years, and the wars, plagues, diseases, civil unrest, social unrest, political unrest. How many debt ceilings have been solved at the last minute?
70 or something? I don't know.
Housing crisis, financial crisis, and so on, right? And so at any given moment, someone could just throw in the towel. But that's not what history teaches us. That's not what we've learned is the best method for most people when they're in the right allocation. It's to stay the course. The allocation issue is separate, right? You got to be in the right allocation for the long term, but jumping in and out of the market.
And informed by your own financial planning dynamics, how does it fit all together? Not just your not purely your sentiment, but also what are your needs? What are your cash flow demands? How's it all going to fit together? All
right. Thanks for letting me add that.
Yeah, good points.
So it feels we're talking about the debt ceiling, and it feels like a little bit of a game of chicken to me, just to use analogies between the president and Speaker McCarthy. So CNN, which is not a conservative institution of polling, has a poll released this past week, and their poll indicates that 60% say debt ceiling increase should only come with spending cuts.
That's interesting.
So if you're McCarthy and you're the Speaker of the House, majority party, it's not as if you're just towing the Republican line here. I think Americans are growing more and more.
But I bet if you ask those same people, should the U.S. government default on its debt?
I hope it's 99%.
Say no.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But that's the that's why we're at this.
I'm a broken record on this.
Well, that's okay. I think we're all anything's a broken record on this, because
budgets should be dealt in the budget process, and I'm all in on the idea that we should scale back our expenses, or alternatively, you have to raise revenue. I don't particularly like the raise revenue as much,
right?
But
it's the debate you're talking.
There's a reality of that, but that's the budget process. That's when that should happen. We've already spent the money. Are we going to pay our bill?
So then, I agree with you. But where are we? We are in a place where the House has passed a bill to raise the debt limit.
Yeah.
As of recording on Thursday, midday.
Yeah.
And
I do think a lot of the guts of that is going to be implausible for Democrats to vote for. It does sound like there's movement, though, on both sides on the idea of, that there's a willingness to take some of that money that was spent for COVID that hasn't been used and reallocate it.
Absolutely. They seem to be stuck over work requirements for Medicaid, one thing, right? So food stamps and such. Should an able-bodied individual with no children and no disability have to work, or should they just get food stamps, or what other entitlements? They're stuck on that, apparently. and other things, right? But so my other point that I was trying to get to is Republicans passed a bill. It's the only bill that's been passed. The Senate is controlled by the Democrats, and the president could file his own bill. They have not put forward even a debt ceiling bill. There's no vehicle.
Yeah.
So it appears that the president's trying to negotiate as far to the middle as he can with his party. He has a liberal party.
Yeah.
And it seems like McCarthy is trying to hold enough votes together to not lose the speakership, right?
Right.
So, whether or not that who blinks first and when do they blink, they both say that they will not be a default, that they'll have a deal. They don't say that we're not going to have a deal. They're both saying it. So
yeah,
I still believe that there's going to be a deal at some point, and the votes are not going to be a Republican vote or a Democrat vote. It's going to be people, I guess I can say like you and I, who might be in Congress that may lean one way or the other, but say, this is what's in front of me. I have to vote for this because if I don't, the consequences are too dire.
Yeah. Well, June 1st, the perceived deadline is Thursday next week.
You're falling right into the whole narrative, the perceived deadline. Like maybe it's not the deadline.
They just don't know.
I know.
Some of it's like, if you got some estimated taxes, maybe you could help us out. Send them in. Before.
Exactly. They're counting the dollars. The Thursday morning, they were giving me a report of how much money came in and out the last day. So it was a positive day. So maybe it's June 2nd now. I don't know.
Right. Exactly. It's one of those things where you just don't know how close to that edge before you fall off the cliff. That all being said, I still think it wouldn't be surprising to me if they don't get to the point where they can reach some consensus where they say, all right, well, we're going to push this off a few months.
Yes, and that is an option.
And then they could tie it all to budgets and debt ceiling as separate things, but everybody walks away with something they wanted. You know what I mean? It just seems like you could see that happening too.
If they extended this 100 days right in the middle of the annual
fiscal year or timing
for the feds, then they could actually tie them together.
Yeah, or they could call them separate, but negotiate simultaneously. You know what I mean?
If that's the plan, do that now, please, and take
some stress out of everybody's. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to other things. I thought this was kind of an interesting week as well because we had two new entrants into the Republican field of candidates. Long awaited Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Tim Scott, who had indicated he might be
South Carolina. Yep.
Yeah. So now, do you think? I don't know. Just what are your thoughts, Jeff? I'll just leave it.
These are my two favorites, actually, who have entered. If I had to pick a team right now of who I'd like the ticket to be, this is the ticket. I'm not saying who's going to be, where on the ticket. These two gentlemen are high quality individuals who have a lot to offer as Republicans to the country. I think that, DeSantis is number 2 in the polls, right behind the former President Trump. And so it's going to take someone who's able to stand up to Trump because this is going to be a drag out primary. It's going to be a rough primary. And I think Governor DeSantis, my governor here in Florida, I've seen him close up and personal and, how he handles the media and adversaries. And I think he's up for the task. I love Tim Scott's positive vision for America, positive expressions of his faith and his individual story of his own upbringing and the narrative that he brings to that. So I'm very glad that both of these gentlemen are in it. My concern is there's more to come, meaning we could very well, I'm a Republican, we could very well have 10 individuals in the primary who are credible. And when you have that many, it runs the risk of diluting the vote, if you will. And
so far we have, there's a lot of people who have filed, but there's really 4 to 5
sure
brands that you could, recognize. Would you agree?
Well, yes, but when you have, even if some of the, I used the number 10 because I saw a graphic this week of the likely candidates in, and it was 10. And I grant you, some of them are, probably won't get out of the 1% and 2%. But as you're diluting these 1% and 2%, the former President Trump is going to hold his base at whatever that number is, and it won't be a majority. In my view.
I mean, there's some people that have no name recognition whatsoever, and there's like, they're just, we assume they're gonna not be relevant, right? You're talking about people like Governor Sununu, perhaps, or
Right.
Governor Abbott, or some of these other people that have possibly one of your senators has been talked about, like
Mayor of Miami. There's I wouldn't say Governor Abbott will be one of those people that does not get some traction. I think he's attractive to.
I think it seems like he seems to be staying on the sidelines for now. It doesn't seem like he's making his bid right now, but maybe time passes and see who gets traction. Maybe he'll jump in, but
we can go back 4 years ago and look at the Republican field, and that's what I don't want to see, where it turns into a shooting match,
right,
between everyone on the stage, and someone with 35% support rises to the top, just because the vote is so diluted.
I think I mean, I still am kind of in favor of Asa Hutchinson, former governor of Arkansas, but I don't think he's getting traction by any means. I think he's, if he may, emerge if other people, don't. If, for example, if Ron DeSantis were to fizzle or something like that. Right now, Ron DeSantis is your second behind former President Trump
in the polls.
I think couple of things.
Just disclosure. I'm already saying this to other people, so if I'm talking about it on the radio, I should disclose it. I'm voting, unless the world changes, for Ron DeSantis in the Republican primary when it comes around. I'm very impressed with him as our governor, and I think that he's the best choice in my mind. So my comments are biased.
I don't know that he's likable enough. He just seems somewhat unlikable.
President Trump likable to you?
Not at all.
So you're making my point.
But I don't think he can win either. President Trump can't win this time around.
But if you're here's my fear: if someone like you, Chris Boyd, votes for Hutchinson in the primary with this field, like you think he's the best candidate, which is you're right, you're not voting for DeSantis because you don't think he's the right choice. But if you're voting down ticket to people who are not going to win, if that's the analysis.
Well, we're a long way from where I'm voting at this point. So let's just talk about the merits of the candidate before we talk about the actual casting of the vote.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I'm open to learning more about Ron DeSantis. I have no doubt you have been following him more closely than I have. But let's hope his announcement isn't a metaphor, and by that I mean where he had the technical difficulties and all that
with Twitter, yeah.
And what I mean is, I think we've seen him have a little bit of a struggle when it came to talking about Ukraine. I think there's a danger in Republicans generally trying to focus on the social issues as the focal point of their campaign. And I think Ron DeSantis is a little prone to doing that. Whereas I think if we talk about other types of issues, whether it's about economy or foreign policy, we have a much stronger positioning. When it comes to some of the socially divisive issues, Ron DeSantis is in the thick of that. And you can say, oh, that's the Trump playbook. But I don't think that's going to be a winning recipe in the 2024 election.
I'm saying that if the folks who are making and this is what people do, so it's not wrong, but people are making decisions or opinions about Ron DeSantis based upon certain media outlets and what they report, my affection and admiration for Ron DeSantis is seeing him govern the state through things like COVID, seeing Ron DeSantis manage the state in like the hurricane that damaged so much of the West Coast, and his leadership, and to see him stand up to
the distractions of social issues, though, work against him. I think, when
I think they're distractions because they're reported in that way, but I don't feel that way when I see him at work and follow him individually. I see the media reports and the attacks.
Yeah.
So it's driving, and that's what happens to candidates. I mean, it's not all what you want it to be, right?
Right.
He has stepped into the culture wars. I'll grant you that. I think he stepped into the culture wars because of the sincere belief that we're heading the wrong way in some of these issues in our schools or whatever the situation is. And I don't think it's a political decision. I think it's what he believes is right for the state of Florida and the country. So, voters have to decide if that's right for them. But I don't think that's his focus. I think that's what the media has and his opponents have made his focus. But I don't think.
And I do think he's got a likability issue, and I'll be interested to see if he can come across, if as he's now it's not just what people characterize about him, how he comes across will be really important to me to say, what's he talking about? What's he prioritizing?
That's fair. What's he talking about on the stump himself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just what they're portraying it to be. He did win his last election by 1.5 million votes in a state that, Florida, although it's trending Republican, that was the biggest margin for a Republican in state history. So the people who know him best here and have seen him overwhelmingly
reelect very well. Yeah. Well, and I hope ultimately that, we get some of this pendulum kind of swing where we get some, in terms of policy prescription, what things look like. We'll see how things progress. Obviously, we're out of time, so got keep going on. We could solve the problems of the world, Jeff.
We sure could.
Reminder for everyone that we have a Social Security seminar. I did it too. Seminar coming up on June 6th at 9 to 11. Register. It's in Hyannis, Courtyard Marriott, but you have to register. Go to our website, amrfinancial.com, or give us a call, 508-771-8900. And if you need any help with any aspect of your financial planning or portfolio management, reach us again through our website, amrfinancial.com, or 508-771-8900. Jeff, thanks so much for your efforts for today's show. Great show. Have a great Memorial Day weekend to you and everyone else.
Thank you.
You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd, Financial Talk Show.
Asset Management Resources, LLC, and J. Christopher Boyd, CFP, provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is in the nature of general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. AMR, LLC cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.